Hey guys, it's Jace Drive here with a deck profile for Vanguard. This time with Premium. This deck has been in my wakes, and I kind of wanted to show it off because this is a deck that doesn't really do super good against the big metas now these days. But it's been a deck that you can just gain a whole bunch of value, and then the only way you'll lose is by yourself. So it is a OTT deck with Battle Sisters. So first of all, let's introduce our grade threes. 4 of each Flamages and Flamage Reverse. Why am I playing reverses and 8 grade 3s, even though clearly Flamage is better? Flamage Reverse is really good going first, as in this allows you to gain powers, lock your boards for that, as well as scrying cards on top and bottom for just a Counterblast and a discard. Flamage is a really good go second card, as in this card allows you to basically place Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, draw 2. And then getting a gift. So this will give you 3 cards in general. This will give you only the 1 if you go first, but it gives you a lot more aggressive punch powers. As in, when you have a locked card onto your board, your Battle Sister units in the front row gain +5 for each locked card. That is not a restricted skill when you go first. So you ride onto this. This is a really good aggressive start with it. And then if you do ride into a Flamage, your power gain doesn't activate until your opponent's at grade 3. But these are basically the grade 3s you want to go into if you are playing Battle Sister. So it's going to be those grade 3s there. Next up are grade 2s. And then, so we're going to go with the basic ones. So we play with, of course, Battle Sister Trife. 4 of those, as in they will Counterblast 1 to call a unit onto the board from the top 3, then rearrange it, and then if you do have a grade 3 in your soul, if you do constantly rewrite from your Battle Sister Flamages, you will be able to guard against Sentinels, or your opponent cannot call Sentinels from their hand. Next up is Battle Sister Mocha, the V version. This is really good because if it's run upon, you can Soul Blast 1 to look at the top 3, add 1 in the hand, put the rest on the bottom. But it is a unit that says gains 5k and 5 shield if you have 3 more cards in your hand, 3 more different Battle Sisters on the board. And then it also gains 5 more k if you have 4 more cards. So basically it is a 19k attacker with a 10k of shield. And shield is very important in a very aggressive deck like Battle Sisters. And no matter how many times I guard with this, being able to guard small attacks with 1 card is very important, really good. Next up we play in a Rhymia is a 12k vanilla Vanguard for Battle Sister. It is kind of important to have as a rear, but this is basically just like a 12k Vanguard that you can just sit on if you do need to sit on the grade 2 game for a while. It's very fun. You can't get Weenie Rush as well, so if you do, having this out is pretty good. It makes your opponent have to hit proper numbers for sure. Next up are the grade 1s. So we're going to start off with the big things first. So first of all, we're going to play 4 copies of Battle Sister Terragius. Basically is on place, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a Battle Sister card, add to your hand. And whenever your card is revealed by a card effect from your deck, it gains 5k. So it's a 13k attacker. On the turn it is placed, and then it's also 13k booster as the game goes on. This is the greatest early game value you'll ever see, because most cards in your deck are Battle Sisters, and you'll add to your hand. You do play Heal Guardians as well, but this card has done a lot of work. It's a great aggressive first turns, and then it also gives you some early card advantage on the place. So it always refunds itself. Next up, we play 4 of Pantalone, which is moves a unit that goes into your soul to check the top 2. Put 1 on top, 1 on bottom. And then you also get to gain +10 power for the next trigger that's being drive check. So any triggers that are drive check gains +20, or if you play any older triggers, it gains +5. It's a good Battle Sister name, and then you can always just have them on the board. Later, just put it into your soul. And you gain some additional power and some scrying. Checking the top for some triggers and pushing it through. Next up is actually the PGs. The classic grade 1 PGs of Marmalade. If you do hit with Trial Say, they add to your hand. Also, they are units that can protect a Battle Sister unit. But if you have multiple copies in your graveyard, a copy in your graveyard while having 3 or less cards in your hand, you do get to draw back 1. So you can just chain like a whole bunch together to just draw a card. Of course, you can just play like 3 and like 1 Elementario as well. It doesn't hurt the deck as well, but I do surprisingly kind of just need a board. And calling PGs is not the worst thing, because you can always call over it with other better stuff, and then you just have more in the drop zone. So these guys are probably not that bad, and I personally like it just a little bit more, because you do get a lot of card advantage through the grade 3 plays and everything else. Next up is 2 copies of the V Coco. When it's placed, you may call when something is placed on top of it, you may call its rear, and you may rest it. If you do, you get to check the top card of your deck, and then you can put it on top or bottom. If you put it to the bottom, you give a unit +3. This allows you to do some simple checks on the top, and it does give you a little bit of power if you do. It's also a great target for your locks for reverse, as well as just having a nice unit just to scry and boost with it as well. So this is that. And we do play 2 Stride Enablers, Bumpkins. Basically, this searches out for mods for which one you ever want to do. And it's also a Stride Follower, because primarily you do want to just ride every turn. So having just 2 Stride Followers in your hand that is Battle Sister named also helps you out with like more future Battle Sister cards onto your board, as well as some boosters is nice as well. Onto the grade zeros. So we play 4 Muffins. It is your Battle Sister recycling trigger. This will basically just enable your deck to just have crits all the time. Shields threats. It's a 5k power, so you do have to be worried on that. But if you activate Pentalinea with this as well, if you do Drive Tick, it is become a 15k power. So numbers are a little bit more different than your opponent would expect. So they do have to be more careful about this. And then calling this early as well. And then letting you shuffle this back as well early game allows you to do that. If you do target a unit if you do have a Battle Sister Vanguard, that unit does gain +3, and then on attack, if you have 5 more cards in your hand, you get to countercharge 2. But you primarily just play it as like a critical trigger to cycle. But having that extra line of text is also really good as well. Next, sorry. Next up, we have our heals. They are the Heal Guardians. And it is not the Battle Sister heals, because surprisingly, being the grade 3 matters. If you do just randomly soul charge this with the Amaterasus, and then you just have a Trifle in your hand, you can't just soul blast these and then just go with there. Also, of course, once again, in the game of Vanguard, aggro does matter, especially in this coming format. This allows you to just not deal with aggressive pushes or some big damage coming your way. And of course, we do play 3 draw triggers with an over trigger. The Cray Elements are one, because surprisingly, if you have the Keller Sanctuary one, you just draw 2 cards, and that can kill you at games. But having 2 units with 1,000,000 power, especially if it's Trifle, which you can just do Sentinel Restrict, does end games if you have just 2 of those onto the board. As well as 4 Strike Crits, because, once again, like with the Strides in the Battle Sister Strides, this is important to just ride and stride at the same time. So having one of these in your hand is really good. And your starter is, of course, the one that says gain a quick shield, draw a card. If you're going second, make a quick shield, and then on ride, draw 1. I have the SP one because I'm fancy like that. But you can just use any kind as you want as well. Next up is with the G Zone. So, the G Zone is fairly simple. We'll go with the Heal Guardians first. We have 2 Son of Eternity Amaterasus and 2 Decadent Reinforcer Octakangle Magus. This is from the Foo Fighters collection. Amaterasu is really good. It lets you Soul Charge 1 to check the top card of your deck, put it on top or bottom. And then it also gained 15k shield if you have 4 or more cards, which you will obviously. So it's 10,000. So there's obviously a guaranteed 25k shield as well as a check on the top of your deck. Octangular Magus is on place counter blast 1. If you do declare 2 grades on 2 grades from your deck, reveal the top card. If the grade matches the number, it gains plus 15k shield and you add that card to your hand. So most likely you will declare grade 0s or 1s, and you can add those to your hand. If you comment with Amaterasu, you can just scry for days. But this is pretty much a 30k shield and a free and a cantrip pretty much, because you'll always get back the card that you discarded this with your G Guardians. And it does help if you do have to fight against like fairly tall like rear guards or Vanguard decks. Next up is the most obvious thing we play in OTT. It is 4 copies of Ikishima. GB3. Counterblast, Soul Blast, flip a unit with the same card name as this, and then you draw 2 cards. As well as GB3, for this turn, if you have Oracle, or activate this effect only if you have Oracle. For this turn, your opponent cannot guard with grade 0s and G Guardians. So this does shut down decks that play Trigger Sentinels, because you can't guard with those. And then G Guardians as well shuts down like the very big shields. You do have to worry that your opponent still can guard with the Heal Guardians, because they are grade 3 triggers units. It is a 15k power, but still a relevant number. But if you do combine with Ikishima with your Trifle, it's definitely not Trifle, it's something like that. But this is pretty much creates the Silent Tom Lock, which is you cannot guard with any card with it except for Elementario, because Elementario is an order. So do have to worry on that, because that is a one-way lock. But this allows you to pretty much close the games when you need to close the games with that fella. Next up, we have 2 copies of Wakaru Hime. Basically, she says when she attacks, if you have an Oracle, which is 5 cards more in your hand, Counterblast, Soul Blast, flip a copy, draw a card, and put a card on top of your deck. You can just stack over triggers with this. It's really strong. Being able to just manipulate over triggers on top, heals even on top, crits are really good as well. This can just close games onto this, but this is kind of like a more of a, if your opponent has not been in def range, you can try to get them into def range with Wakaru Himes. But that's more of a backup plan. Pretty much, your next card that you will always first strike into is the new Happiness Cavering Dragon King, which is from the previous premium collection. It's really good. When it's played, you may play the act to flip a card in your G-Zone face up. If you do, reveal the top X cards where it's the number of your G-Zone plus 2. Call any normal units from those cards among them. Add all trigger cards to your hand, then apply all trigger effects after that. This card's really good, because if you don't have a board, this will spam you a board. If you need to drive check triggers, if you need to get triggers, you can. This also works during the main phase, so you can make sure that something is always a threat. Usually even your Vanguard is really good. But making a rearguard a threat with just triggers before you even drive check is really strong, and I really enjoy this card. If you do have to overcall, you have to overcall. But this card is really good. You'll always go into this first, and then even on later games, it's not the worst as well. Because half the time your deck will be with the Battle Sister crit triggers, and then you can always cycle them back and then play this again. Next up is our favorite stride, if we do have to go into a different stride from the last one. Excite Battle Sister Strolling. You may counterblast one. You flip a copy of it face up. If you do, you may soul charge one, and then check the number of cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of Battle Sisters on your board. And then the rare GB3 skill is all your rearguards with Battle Sister gain plus 3. Primarily, you just go into this for a stride. Clock Dragon's usually the first thing you go to, because it doesn't cost any resources, but G-Flip, this one costs a counterblast. But sometimes if you can't get them into the def range of Ikishima, which is like 4 to 5 damage, these cards will be able to close off that gap. I rarely use this, but it's very nice just to have that access. And the 2 other cards that I play that is a big access to the deck is 2 copies of Starting Witch Momo. This is probably what you go after, most likely go into after Dragons. and before Kishimas. Basically, this regard is when this unit attacks, you can cast 1, discard up to 3 cards. For each card you discarded, all units in the front row gain +10 for each one. And then if you discard 3, this does a restanding Vanguard with -2 drive. This is a restanding Vanguard in no TT, and where hand size doesn't really matter half the time. Pumps your front row, which is huge. And yeah, just having a restanding Vanguard with just multiple ways to attack lets you be able to just go ham. And it's really big. And most people usually are not going to guard against most of these. You also have recycling crits, so you can always have a Vanguard with like crits power as well. It's a threat. It's very scary. People have to guard this aggressively, and then if it doesn't close out that gap from 3 to 4 damage, or even 5 damage, you always have the threat of Ikishima. So having 2 of these is really good. It doesn't flip itself over, because it does need to flip a card in your Jizo face up. So you can flip your dead dragons, your dead Shrolins, your Kishimas if you don't need to, but having just restanding Vanguard is really good in LTT. How this deck work is pretty much how does this deck work is pretty much you just keep on drawing cards while having an aggressive board state. Because you'll always be able to card more cards, or just having a big board on your field, and all that fella. And then primarily is you will just be writing on top of your formages. You'll primarily write into formages. If you are going second, if you are going first, you'll write into your reverses. But primarily is you want to just always hit your formages to draw out your cards, and then you'll just always have a fairly large hand. I think you average about 9 to 10 cards in your hand. This does like not die against like ride down decks, because you can always have like you can play that grade 2 game as well. But the grade 3 game is if you do ride up, you do create like a lot more power and punch through. This deck does also just die to like a whole bunch of multi attacks. So if you can't guard against the multi attacks, it's going to hurt you as well. It didn't do too bad when I first built it in the Ripple format. So this deck will actually like kind of survive it. But I think right now the deck is pretty solid. I would say it's a 1.5 tier. It is not tier 1 per se, because there are a lot more better decks that are 1.5 that could just kill people. But this is pretty much my favorite decks in premium. It is a classic oldie, but an oldie. OTT is always a fun deck for me. Even though I do play a lot of Bermuda and Lyrical, OTT was my first clan to get into, and Battle Sisters is a deck that I truly fell in love with. But that is pretty much that. Hopefully, I will get some more videos up for card games. Maybe some more deck profiles, maybe a gameplay or 2 if I'm lucky. But that is pretty much it. And as always, follow, like, subscribe, do the things. There will actually be a Decklog in the description, so you can check that out. And then, yeah, thanks for everyone for watching. You all have a good day.